India's growing dependence on imports, the government's new focus is to make in India. But companies are held back by the high cost of credit. There's growing pressure from industry and the government to soften interest rates and boost the economy. Despite that, this week India's central bank governor Raghuram Rajan kept key interest rates unchanged. Samir Hashmi met him and began by asking him when we can expect the central bank to start easing its policy.
Well, there's still some uncertainty about the evolution of inflation. We've seen 2 months of surprisingly good inflation data. Now, some of this is because of what we call base effects. Last year inflation was high, so measured with respect to that high base, this year inflation is low. Those base effects continue into next month, but then they wane after that. So what we want to see is, post these base effects, what does inflation look like? That's one. And of course, there is the budget targets that were set last year. We want to see how the government manages to meet those. The government has said quite firmly that it intends to stay on course, but time will give us space to judge how we're performing there.
Now, the Reserve Bank of India has forecast 5.5% growth for the Indian economy in this financial year, which ends in March 2015. Do you think the new government, headed by Prime Minister Modi, has taken enough steps to give a boost to the economy?
What were the 3 or 4 big things that need to be done to get the economy rolling? I think one is on power, the second is on mining, the third is land acquisition, and the fourth is big investment projects like the railways. On all 4, the government is taking some steps to start making some changes. I think there are other sort of actions underway which are more longer term, such as improving the business environment, trying to make the labor laws a friendlier compromise between workers and business people. And finally, tax laws and tax implementation, tax administration, that's another thing the government is looking at to make sure there's predictability.
So if you look beyond this financial year, how do you see India growing, both in the short and medium term?
Well, we would add a percentage point of growth for every year till 2017. So 6.5 next fiscal, and 7.5 the fiscal after. 7.5. I wouldn't be so bold as to say 7.5. Beyond that, I think it's how these other reforms that are underway come together, and of course how the global environment looks. I think our periods of strongest growth was when the global environment looked stronger.
Now, Fed has terminated its quantitative easing program, and there are talks that it will start raising interest rates. Will that have an impact on the Indian currency?
Our focus is on improving domestic policy, creating the conditions for growth, stable, sustainable growth. And if we do that, my sense is investors will be discriminating between investment homes. And it's hard for them to ignore India as a final destination, given the prospects of this economy.
Last year, when the Fed announced that it would start winding down the quantitative easing program, the rupee was battered. It lost a lot of its value during those 2 or 3 months. Are you worried of a similar situation?
Well, think of it last year. Last year when this happened, we were running inflation above double digits. We had a current account deficit of 4 to 5%. The fiscal deficit was significantly higher than it looks to be going forward. Given all these, investors did get a little worried about India. This year, our current account deficit is tracking 1.5%. Our inflation is 5.5 CPI year on year, and looks like at least another month of coming down further. And we have plenty of reserves. So, should I be as worried? You tell me.
Now, last year, Governor Rajan, when you took charge, people here in India or the financial markets called you the rock star. Some even referred to you as James Bond. Is that image still intact?
I hope not. I hope not. Central bankers are boring, conservative guys, and I intend fully to be a boring, conservative central banker. So the only sort of innovation, I hope, is in policies, nothing else.
So should I ask you that when your tenure comes to an end, would you want to be remembered as the James Bond banker?
No.
Well, it's time for a short break now, but when we come back...